Hello and welcome. I'm Raziel. Now I'm going to start a new series. It's going to probably be once a month, round about from the 5th to the 10th, depends. And it's going to be reviewing starter sets because honestly, I've come to see that unless people are talking about other games, like people who do lots of different war games, people who review Warhammer in particular only review Warhammer, and that's so they have nothing to really compare it to on quality. And so they'll be like, hey, this is a good box because it saves you money, or blah blah blah, whether and not looking at it or comparing it to a different box which might be a better starter set and a better game to get into. And if you're only comparing it to something to itself, it's just going to be unjust. It's going to be completely biased and not a very good review. Now, I'm not being harsh on Games Workshop particularly because I'm going to start doing this because I want people to get into wargaming and get into this hobby as a whole with the knowledge of what they're getting into with. And I'm going to start with the starter sets, and I'm going to review them completely objectively as best as I can and tell you what the problems are. And I'm not going to be nitpicky either. It's not going to be like little tiny problems. It's going to be issues that will affect the newcomer as a whole rather than a veteran. So if you're a veteran, you want to watch this carry on, but I do want people to realise this is for people just getting into the hobbies or the war games from scratch. Like they have very little knowledge outside of it. So now we're going to start with the Warhammer 40k starter set. Now I'm not going to do the bigger one because at over 100, I think it's like 130 quid now, is well overpriced. It's just not worth getting on the basis of the price alone. And the other one is, I don't know, it's basically a kill team, to be honest with you. But talking a kill team, I'll get to that in a minute. Now, the first thing I want to bring up is the so-called rulebook, or what they say is the handbook, which has the very core rules in it. Now, to me, that's one of the first problems with this box, that it has just the core rules. Now, the reason the problem with the core rules is that there's a lot of rules missing which aren't in this book. And so getting into said hobby, getting into 40k, you're not getting into it with all the rules you need to play the game. You're getting into it with basically a bare bones version. And the other problem is that these rules are out of date now as well. There's more FAQs for someone getting into the hobby, if you're just getting into the hobby, for you to download just to cover up the issues with the rules. And there's more pages of FAQs for the rules than there is in this book, in the core rules section of this book. And again, that's just a massive issue. Like, you're not going to be able to really get into the game proper because you don't have all the information you need from to start off. To start off, you don't have all the information. You're very, very, very scratch built. And that's kind of an issue. That's a very big issue in my opinion. The other problems with this, now you can say this is nitpicky, is that it has a painting section on how to paint your models. And the problem with this is that it's just Ultramarines and High Fleet Leviathan. There's no Blood Angels, there's no Dark Angels, no Space Wolves, no Black Templars. Now, honestly, they didn't have to do all of them because obviously there's not enough room, but they could have just done strips with Ultramarines basic, Blood Angels basic, and Black Templars basic. I chose those three in particular because red's very common, black's very common, and blue's very common. These are very common colours for Space Marine chapters. So they won't be stuck knowing only how to paint blue. It's also got the instructions. They have instructions, they're fine, they're perfectly fine to build them. There's nothing wrong with those. I cannot complain about the instructions. Now, there's these data sheets. Again, these data sheets are out of date, like the rulebook, and there's only enough data sheets for the models in the box, for the units in the box. Now, you might say this is nitpicking. Let me explain why this is a big, big problem. First things first, if you only got the data sheets for what's in the box, you're not going to have any form of inspiration on what to buy next. You won't know how they work, you won't know how they play, you cannot read the rules, and you won't know what you need to do next, and you're just stuck with what's in the box. And you're going to have to take advice from other people just to do this. And now other people have different opinions, different ways of playing, and their version of playing might not match yours because you might like a large infantry, Space Marine infantry army, or you might like lots of tanks, but there's different ways of playing. So what they should have done, in my opinion, and what would have made it a lot better, is having all the data sheets for the two armies. Now, I'm not saying all the data sheets for all the armies, though that would have been absolutely stellar, because almost everyone else does that, or has them free online, so there's no reason for this. But it just gets people to stuck with the models in the box. There's no real incentive to go out and buy anything else. Now, the thing is, the core rules are free online as well. So not just in this handbook, you can get them free online to download, but again, they're not updated. They're still the same out-of-date rules. So you've got the data sheets that are out of date, and you've got the handbook, which is the core rules, which are out of date, and have so many FAQs and everything else. Then there's the problem with the data sheets, is because it's just the ones in the box, you're sort of stuck to buy the codex for your army, which again, that brings up the price of $67.50 up to over £100. So now it goes from the cheapest, and it is the cheapest, so the actual starting set price isn't that bad, it's the cheapest starter set I know, over to one of the most expensive ones just to play a single army. And then you have to get the main rulebook, which is mostly out of date anyway, just to get everything you need to play the game. So you're going to have to spend more on books for this starter set. So it's not really a starter set because you're going to have to buy more to go with it to actually get into the game properly and not just have this small game. This really doesn't teach anyone how to play 40k. Now, we're going to look at the models now. Now, the models look fine. I have no issues with them. Okay? I'm not going to complain about the models. They are fine. But this is where the issue arises. Now, the Space Marine side is horrid. I do not like the Space Marine side. You have very few model variations. You basically got 5 different models there, and just so many are repeated. Like the Terminators are repeated, the Infernus Marines are repeated, or you've got the Sergeants of both, and you've got the Assault Cannon and the Captain. Look, they look good. They're nice looking models. But it's all the same model, basically. Not literally, basically. And that can be a turn off for some people. And there's not even that many different stances either. Like, you can't really change them so much that they look differently. They're all going to look the same. And they're push fit as well, which comes with its own problems, because I find that even with the push fit, you're going to have to cut bits off just so they actually fit flush. So you're going to have to glue them together anyway. But this Captain they look good, but this is just a horrid starting army for Space Marines. And one of the biggest reasons is there's no bolt guns, no bolt rifles. The Space Marine iconic weapon is missing from this game. It's been in every other edition except this one. Yes, we have Storm Bolters, fair enough, but no actual bolt guns. It would have not been hard just to slip in 5 intercessors. It would have done a lot of good for the box because you would have had an extra unit, even though they would have been mostly the same models again, but you would have had this extra unit and a bit of variation. And the other thing is, it doesn't really teach you how to play Space Marines properly. You've got the Infernus, and you've got the Terminators, and you've got the Captain. It's not teaching you how to play Space Marines properly. You don't know, so you could go up against another Space Marine with the same points as this, and probably get a better army and a lot different and not know why. And you're just stuck with this stuff, and it's just going to sort of be a problem for anyone getting into it because of that. It doesn't teach you how to play Space Marines. You've got no psychic powers there, you've got no fast attack, you've got your elites, you've got no real heavy support. You've got nothing there except Infernus, Stormbolters, and that's it. And it doesn't really teach you melee because you've only got one melee unit there, and that's also a very shooty unit. And so, but then when you look at the Tyranid side, now the Tyranid side, in my opinion, is far better. It's a far better side. and I think I just skipped it. Let me go see if I can go through. Games Workshop, you suck. Your website sucks. There we go. Sorry. Here we go. This is the Space Marine. This is the Tyranid side. There's no arrow there to point up. Just put an arrow there so we can see it. Anyway, as you can see, this is the Tyranid side. And as like I said, you're coming from this, from a starter's point of view, from someone just getting into the hobby. You see the Space Marine scene, 11 models, quite bland, quite boring, lots of the same. And yes, well, Tyranids, again, have lots of the same. There's a lot more detail there. And you also see there's a lot more models and different units. You've got the Rin's Leaper there. You've got the Big Boy there. You have the Alpha Prime and the Termagants. And you go, alright, actually, this is a side that looks like a proper army. This looks like I've actually got an army there. Now, I know a lot of veterans go, well, it's pretty well balanced. Well, that's not the problem here. The problem is coming from a starter's point of view. And when you come in from a starter's point of view, you've got to look at these two armies and which one looks more appealing as an army. And when you see the Tyranid side and how big that is to start your army off, and you see the Space Marine side and see how small that is, it's going to give the Tyranids, it's going to be more people will gravitate towards the Tyranids if they're going by size and model count. And this is the other thing. Now, if you already play 40k and you do Space Marines or Tyranids, this isn't even a good box to do for Space Marines, because you would really, really need the Terminators and the Infernus just to sort of justify buying this. Whereas with this side, you can see there's a lot more variation and a lot more stuff to do. Like, you actually have 3 different types here. You have your troops, elites, and a heavy support, or a big creature. You have a centerpiece there for your Tyranids, which again just makes the Tyranid side so much better than the Space Marine side. Now, if I was to give this a score, it's going to be 4 out of 10. It's a low score. And the reason I'm doing this is because, while the models, the only 2 things this has got going for this is the price, being one of the cheapest, before you have to buy anything else, and the Tyranid army. That's the only 2 good things for this box. If you're going into this box for the Space Marines, just don't. You buy a combat patrol for your chapter you like, or even buy a combat patrol for a different chapter, but paint them your chapter. Doesn't matter, because the core rules are still free. They are. And you're still going to have to buy the codex. So you're not really going to be spending that much more on that than you are on this, you know. And that's it. And if you're doing Tyranids, it's a good booster for Tyranid armies, because Gaunts it's a horde army. You're going to need lots of Gaunts, and you've got a big monster there, and you've got the Alpha Prime, and you've got the Rin's Leapers, so you've got a lot more variation to add to your Tyranid army. So the Tyranid side actually does, if you're into Tyranids, it's well worth getting, in my opinion, because you are getting a decent starting army. If you're going in for the Space Marines, you're going to be let down. And the other problem is like the rules and the data sheets are both out of date. You have to buy extra books to go with it just to get actually into the game. This is a starter set. This is meant to be the one that gets you into the game, but this is more like a prologue set, sort of a taster set. This isn't really a starter set. That's why it's scoring so low. And like I said, the only thing it's got going for it is the Tyranid side and the price, and that's it. But what it's got going against it is just far, far worse. You've got very few Space Marines. They all look the same. And yes, I know they're Primaris, but still. You've got a out-of-date, bare-bones rulebook, and you don't even have a full rulebook. You get the data sheet, which are out of date, but only for models in the box. So you have no inspiration or incentive to buy anything else outside of what's in the box, because why would you? Because you have to buy a new book just to know what you can add to your army. You're going to probably have to buy the rule book as well. You're going to have to buy the whole big rule book as well. Again, in this starter set, which doesn't have the full rule book, but still has the same, but still is out of date. And you're still going to have to buy the big cool rule book to get most of the rules, which is also out of date. So you're going to still have to download a hell of a lot of rules on FAQs, not just for the codex, which will be out of date, by the way. I'm just saying that. for the updates for your army, the updates for the rulebook, and it's going to be it's not really getting you into the game because you've got so much work just to get into the game, just to get into 40k. Afterwards, just to play it, and you don't need that. That's not what you should have for a starter set. A starter set should be exactly that. Everything you need to play the game from the get-go. Everything. I would excuse some dice or measuring because, dice and measuring, anything to measure with, it's 10 a penny. You can easily get that. But as for rules and the army units and the unit rules, you do need to have all of it, so you can know what to get next. You know all the rules, so you're not going to be stuck as a new player and someone giving you a rule that's like, I don't know, this rule's not in my handbook. It's like, okay, you pull out the cool rule book, it's right there. And it's not really a good starter set for those reasons, and it's a very bad starter set. It's not worth your money. If you're getting into 40k, there's better ways to do this, and even if you're doing Space Marines or Tyranids, there's better ways to do it than this box. Well, actually, Tyranids is pretty good for this box. It's like one of the best ways, because the Combat Patrol is going to cost less than this does. It costs more than this does, and the missing Barbcorns. So getting the Barbcorns and this box is actually going to save you money on the Combat Patrol. Same with the Space Marines, but the Space Marines only are missing a Librarian. Again, it's just one model compared to a whole unit for Tyranids, which you would need to get to make the Combat Patrol box. And so that's it. Well, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review, and I hope I was objective as possible and tried to make sure that it wasn't complaining. It was just pointing out the issues and why this isn't worth your money. And yes, I do actually have this. I will be doing 40k, World of Exodus, War Cradle, Games Workshop, War Cradle, Mantic, Warlord Games, Parabellum Games, all their starter sets. I'll be doing them too, and other starter sets should I think it might be interesting. But again, this is coming from a point of view from comparisons to. So I know I have a quality limit, and this just doesn't hit it. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a good day. If you wish to save money on your Warhammer, or any other war game actually, or a starter set, go down to Whaling Games down below for up to 20% off and free delivery up to £20. There is also Forbidden Planet for all your fun geeky merchandise, toys, teddies, books, comics, everything's there, and pretty well priced as well, I suppose. There's also my merchandise, stickers, cups, etc. My comics, if you want to see Little Red Riding Hood go ham on some Lovecraftian werewolves, cyborgs, or cyborg Lovecraftian werewolves. I don't know however you want to say it. And there is also Skyforge. Never forget Skyforge. And finally, there is Patreon, because business. Bye-bye.